This is the Book Deal podcast,
where you will discover the inspiring stories behind your favourite books.
We interview seasoned and debut authors, as well as publishing industry professionals, to bring you the best tips and advice on how to get that elusive book deal.
So no matter what stage of writing you're at, we've got you covered. I'm Tina Strawn.
I'm Madeleine Cleary.
And I'm Natasha Rye.
And join us as we pull back the curtain of published authors,
one deal at a time. The Book Deal podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters which it's recorded on, and pays respect to their elders past, present, and emerging.
Hi everyone, it's Tina Strawn here, and welcome to the Book Deal podcast and another incredible author interview to share with you all. I am very excited to bring you this week's guest, the kidlit legend, Jacqueline Harvey. Jacqueline is a huge name in kidlit, with her best-selling titles including the Alice Miranda, Clementine Rose, Kenzie and Max, and Wooler and Wolf series. But as Jacqueline shares, it took her almost 10 years to become an overnight success. And in this interview, she shares her journey to full-time author, which includes rejections, bad cover designs, and refusing to give up on her characters. Jacqueline has now published almost 70 books, narrated 40 audiobooks, and 2 of her books are now animated feature films. Jacqueline has seen it all in her 20-year publishing history, and she generously shares it all with us. I am so excited to be here today with kidlit royalty, Jacqueline Harvey. Welcome to the Book Deal podcast.
Thank you so much, Tina. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, you are an absolute legend in the kidlit world. You have sold millions of copies of your books. They've been made into TV shows and movies, and I know that you're going to have a ton of advice for our listeners.
I hope so. I like to share. So.
Yes, I know, and that's why we know you'd be perfect for the podcast. But first, congratulations on your new book that's coming out. So when this goes to air, it'll be in the next few weeks anyway.
Yes.
Girl and the Ghost. So
the third book
in the series. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the third book in the series. So it's the Girl and the Ghost grand opening. So we're up to number 3. I can't believe we're up to number 3 already in that series, as it only launched in May last year. So yeah, it's been a very busy year.
That is a quick turnaround. Can you tell us a little bit about Girl and the Ghost, where your idea came for this new series?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was, I guess, looking for something new in the middle grade space because obviously, Alice Miranda and Kenzie and Max, I've written a lot of books in those series, and I was in Singapore in October 2023, and I was in Singapore. I was doing some work in Singapore, and I was doing a book signing at Kinokuniya, the big bookshop on Orchard Road. And while I was in there, a friend of mine, a Singaporean friend of mine, said to me at the end of the signing, he said, "There's a prince in the bookshop." I said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous, David. There's not a prince in the bookshop." And he said, "Have a look for the bodyguards." And so I looked around the room and I went, oh my God, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bodyguards. And I was looking at them, and I was looking at who they were watching. And they were watching this very handsome young man standing on his own by a bookcase. And David said, "Yeah, he's a prince. He's one of the princes of Brunei." Anyway, so I was sort of just watching this whole shenanigans, and he looked a bit sad and lonely, I have to say. I thought, you poor guy, you have to go into a bookshop and all you have is bodyguards watching you and nobody comes near you. And his fiance was there as well. She was this gorgeous girl with long dark hair, and she was over on the other side of the shop. Anyway, then the girls in the shop got this harebrained idea, and they said to me, Miss Jacqueline, you should give the prince a book." I said, "I'd rather die than give a prince a bookshop." And they said, no, it could be the best moment of your life. I said, "It could be the last moment of my life if those bodyguards don't like me." So anyway, then my friend David, who has met everybody famous in the world, he gets in on the act and he says, go on, you should do it. And then my husband, he weighs in, and our friends who are there. And I thought, you know what? He's just a person. And I thought, what do I have to lose? I could be horribly embarrassed, but what do I have to lose? So I walked over with a Willer and Wolf book in hand. That's what I was there promoting. And I said, "Excuse me, Your Royal Highness," at which time I was surrounded by 6 bodyguards demanding to know what did I want with the prince. So I said, children's author from Australia. I just thought it'd be nice to say hello, give him a book. Anyway, the prince waved them away. And he asked me who I was and what I was doing there. And I said, I believe you're getting married soon and perhaps you and your wife will be blessed with children. I'd like to give you a book. And he said, would you sign it for me, please? And so I signed this book and I'm shaking like anything. And then I thought, oh, he won't touch me because I'm the great unwashed and he's royal. And I went to hand it to him and I had I had the pen stuck in my finger like this, and I'm holding it in between my fingers. And he shook my hand with the pen in my fingers and I just wanted to die. I was so embarrassed. Anyway, then David asked him, could he take a photo? And the prince said, yes, of course. And so we had a photo front on that David took, but my favorite photo is the photo side on of my husband. My husband took it and it's me and the prince side on and 6 bodyguards in the background watching us. So, I had this ridiculous experience where I met a prince in a bookshop. And I started thinking, we went from Singapore, we went to France, and I thought, I could write a book with a prince in it. And I started, having delusions of, writing rom-coms for adults, with a prince and all this sort of thing. And then when we were in France, we traveled all over France for about 6 weeks. And when we were there, we stayed in Versailles for about 3 days, and we actually, I had been to the palace before, but only on a day trip. And this time I got to, stay in the town and go to the palace extensively. And I started thinking, I could write about a French prince, but who would it be? And anyway, then I started researching Marie Antoinette's children. And so Louis XVII is the prince in the book, and he's the ghost. And poor old Louis, or poor young Louis, he had a pretty terrible life. And I decided there's a glitch in his life where nobody saw him for a year and he was in a prison. And I thought, I'm going to take that and use that to age him up and give him a better 4 years of his life than he had, because I didn't want him to be an annoying younger brother kind of figure to my main character. And essentially, meeting a prince in a bookshop is what inspired me to write The Girl and the Ghost.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible story. I thought you were going to say when you had the pen in your hand that you drew on him accidentally or on this really expensive shirt or something.
No, thank goodness. I would have died if I'd done that. Still, it was just embarrassing having a pen, hooked in my fingers when I shook his hand.
Yeah, one of those things that we do when we're kind of in the moment, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, that's that. Yeah. So there's so many things there. So you get your inspiration then for your books and your series. Do you often get them from things like that are happening in real life? Is that?
Yes. Yeah. Often it's traveling. Often it's places that we go to or something interesting that I see, and then I think, oh, how can I turn that into a story? So, even in all of the Alice Miranda books, pretty much, they're set, often they're set at school, but then they're often set in other parts of the world. And every single one of them has been inspired by travels to those places. So, Alice Miranda in China, there's an acrobatics troupe in it. And when we were in China, we went to see these incredible acrobatic shows. And so, that was kind of, oh, that'd make a good idea for a story. So, yeah, I'm always, I guess, picking out bits of real life and thinking, how can I turn that into a story? And even Ken's in Max, the spy series, that was inspired because we were in a pub in London called the Morpeth Arms, and the Morpeth Arms has a restaurant called the Spying Room. And when you go up to the spying room, there is a sign. There's signs on the tables, and it says, "Can you spy on the spies?" And they give you a pair of binoculars on your table. And that's because the Morpeth Arms sits on the Thames, right opposite the headquarters of MI6. And so they give you the binoculars so you can spy across the river at the real spies. And I always thought, how silly to tell everybody where your real spies are, because then they're sitting ducks. And then I thought, what if they're not real? What if MI6 is just a PR company and the real spies are a bunch of kids in an unlikely place around the corner? And so that whole Millbank area, that's what I used. Every location in that story actually exists, apart from number 13 Ponsonby Terrace, which is where the twins, where Kenzie and Max live. And I made sure there was no number 13, or that house doesn't actually exist, because, people say, why do you do that? And I said, because just in case kids get a bit obsessed with the books and they go to 13 Ponsonby Terrace and knock on the door. Yeah. And, people have said to me, oh, kids don't do that. I got this incredible letter from a family a couple of years ago with all the photos, and they had been to everywhere that was in the stories. They were having lunch at the Morpeth Arms. They were at outside the Penguin Random House building, which I use as the inspiration for the Beacon newspaper building.
Mm-hmm.
They'd been everywhere, and I thought, and they said to me, we couldn't find number 13 Ponsonby Terrace.
Yes, thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Okay, so that's a really good word of warning then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, they could even just like write letters to that address or something, couldn't
Exactly.
they? And these people are just like that live
People
there are
have been
just
none the
thinking,
wiser, like,
what?
dear Kenzie and Max, who are they writing to? I don't know these people.
Oh, that's incredible. But also the Spying Room, that is a great name for a book.
Yeah.
Isn't it, the Spying Room?
Yeah, the Spying
That's
Room.
cool. Oh, so yes, you've written a lot of books now, Jacqueline. Do you still celebrate each release day when something comes out? Do you still do something?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do. I mean, I always sort of, have a little, I don't know. I mean, I suppose we don't sort of, have big ta-das most of the time. It just depends too. So, for example, for The Girl and the Ghost, we had a really big launch for that in Sydney. We did a high tea at the at one of the hotels in the city. And so, I felt like that was a massive celebration. Swiss Hotel, 100 guests. That was pretty special.
Yeah.
But yeah, every book that comes out, I definitely, raise a glass to the next edition.
Yeah.
So yeah,
To the
and
effort.
it is hard though, and I think it is tricky because often when something comes out, I'm really knee deep into something else, and so it's that thing where you really need to pause and take a breath and say, oh, this is really, yay, we've done this one. And so, yeah, sometimes I have to remind myself, I guess, to, take a breath.
Yeah, and reward yourself for that effort and everybody else, because it's, all the
Yes,
publishers and your editors and everything
absolutely.
as well, isn't it? Yeah, so I think I counted you've got over 60 books, almost close to 70 now.
67, I think I think the next one will be 67,
Yeah,
which is
wow.
not good when you're in schools at the moment, because when you say to kids, I've got 67 books, it's like, oh, and don't even go there. I'm that whole 6, 7 thing. I'm like, no, don't.
Just go
do not
straight
say
to
a word.
68. That's
I'm
okay.
going straight to 68. That's right.
Oh, isn't that funny? Kids, I love those little things that they come up with. Yeah, okay, so that's interesting. Hot tip. So that's a good problem to have though, to have 67 books. You have to worry
Yes.
about saying that. So I feel like, we spoke a little bit about where you get your inspiration from, but I feel like you're someone who has a constant stream of ideas. And,
Yes.
it's been maybe around 20 years since you first published your first book.
Yeah, so my very first book came out in 2003, so it's over 20 years. But I had 4 books come out in quite quick succession in 03, 04, and 05. And then, but I was still working full time I was a deputy head of a school in Sydney. And so then nothing happened for 5 years after that. And when Alice Miranda came out in 2010, that was the book that really changed everything. That was the series that changed everything, because after I still worked full time for the next 3 years, and juggled, and probably didn't have a weekend off for 3 years pretty much. And just it got to the point where I had to make a decision. I couldn't do both anymore. I was just too tired and just not able to do it. And so in October, 31st of October 2012, I took the giant leap to become a full-time writer. And so I have been full-time since the end of 2012, so beginning of 2013.
So you were a teacher before
Yeah, I
that,
was the
weren't
teacher,
you?
and then I was deputy head, and then for the last 3 years of my career, I was what was called the director of development of the school, which meant that I actually had stepped away from the teaching, and I was in charge of communications, publications, the school foundation, the Old Girls Union events,
Oh,
you name it, all those things. And that I went to that job in the school's 125th birthday year. So it was a bit of a baptism of fire to have to suddenly organise, a concert at the Opera House for 3,000 people.
wow.
And dinner dance for the parents for 500 people, that sort of thing. But I really think that job stood me in good stead for being all the stuff that goes with writing, all that peripheral stuff, like organising book launches and doing events, and being able to do your own, how do you spread the word? What sort of media? All those things was really helpful. So I'm glad that I had that, career path.
Yeah, it was kind of like practice or a little bit of
Yep.
extra learning on the way that you don't know you need to know about until you're a published author. But
No, because a lot of people think that you just write a book and then it goes out into the world and then that's the end of it. Well, that's the beginning of it. And so there's so much more to being a writer than just writing the books.
Yeah, definitely. I want to come back to that, but I wanted to ask you, you mentioned, you had a few books out in quick succession, and then there was this 5-year break. Can you talk a
Walk in the
little bit?
wilderness.
That's a
what I
lovely
call
word.
it.
It's a
Walk in the
lovely
wilderness.
research period of time. I don't know. Can you talk a
Uh,
little bit about that? Because that's how it can roll sometimes as an author, can't it?
yeah.
And definitely when people think about second books, because it was a series, those first few books,
So I
wasn't
had
it?
a series called the Codename Series,
Yeah.
World's Ugliest Covers. When your publisher, says to you, "Oh, this is lovely," and you think, "No, it's not actually," go with your gut.
Okay.
If you think it's not, tell them. And
hmm
I was a wuss because I was just so grateful to be published, and I thought, "Oh, I can't say anything because I
Yeah.
don't want to upset anybody."
Mm.
But really, your gut,
hmm
if it's good or it's not. And I just looked at it and went, ugh, yuck.
Yeah.
Um, they were photographs, and the first one wasn't even in focus, so it was pretty rubbish. The girl was in focus, the dog was out of focus, and I was like,
Um,
it should be cute, little girl with a golden retriever puppy, Anyway, so that was the series, and then I did a picture book as well called The Sound of the Sea,
mhm.
and that picture book was an honour book in the 2006 Book of the Year Awards,
Yeah.
and I sort of thought, oh, well, I'm on my way. I'm
Mm.
gonna be a writer, and I thought I'm gonna write picture books. This is my thing. And then nothing happened
Mm.
for, the best part of, well, the next 3 years I was writing, but I was getting knocked back on everything. And, nobody wanted to know me. And one of my things has always been that I wanted to be a one publisher author. I didn't want to be all over the place with, 5 different publishers, because I sort of feel like, well, I looked at really successful Australian children's authors like Maurice Theitzman or Andy Griffiths or Jackie French, and I looked at them and thought, they have one publisher. They've only ever had pretty
Mhm.
much one publisher. And so I tried really hard to stay with the publisher that had published my first 4 books. And unfortunately, they didn't like Alice Miranda. And so, or they didn't want Alice Miranda.
Mm.
And so then I had to, get back out there just shopping it around. And, I was fairly demoralized at this point. I sort of really thought that I'd never get anything published ever again. And I remember having a monumental whinge to a very famous friend of mine called Marcus Zizek, who he was at school doing some work with me with some Year 6 girls. And I remember sitting in my office with him and sort of saying, "Oh, I don't think anything's ever going to happen again. And, it's so hard." Um, and I said something to him about a character that wasn't working, and he gave me a bit of advice, and I just said, "Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll try that." And it was really simple. It was just, think about what's obvious and write the opposite. And it was for a character that just didn't, wasn't resonating with me. And anyway, so I did what he said, and lo and behold, I'm sure that had an impact. But another, well, I don't know I can't tell you how much longer after that. But then I gave Alice Miranda to a friend of mine who knew Lindsay Knight at Random House, and she passed it on to Lindsay, and Lindsay loved it. And then, the rest is sort of history, that suddenly I went from no books on the horizon to many books on the horizon,
Mm.
and my entire life changed. It didn't change overnight. I kept working for 3 years in my job, but by the time I left my school job, I could be a full-time writer. And so that changed everything, because there's not many people that can be full-time writers, sadly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an incredible story. So, and it's amazing that you stuck with, you obviously had faith in the Alice Miranda character in the series. And so you stuck with
Yeah.
that and you really championed that for yourself. Do you have any advice for authors who, because you get a knockback and you think, oh,
Yeah.
well, a lot of people do think that, well, then
Yeah.
the story's not right or it's wrong, or maybe I should just
Yeah,
go
it's
for
not
something
good.
else. Like, yeah.
Yeah. And I was playing over that period of time, I was playing with a lot of different things. So I was, I started writing Alice Miranda as a picture book.
Mm,
And then I sort of got this character and I thought, oh no, she's got a lot more to say. I mean, she has 21 novels now, but she does have a lot more to say.
I know.
And I don't know why. I mean, I suppose I actually just sat back and I thought, I want to write the story that I would have wanted to read when I was 10 years old. And
Mm,
that was what I just thought,
mm,
blow it. I'm just going to write this for me. And I really didn't write it thinking, oh, this is going to do anything amazing. I just wrote it thinking this is the best book that I can write at this time.
mhm,
And I was fortunate too because I had a captive audience at school. So I would test out the material on the kids, and the girls were great. I worked in a girls' school, and so I was very fortunate. I had, really strong relationships with the kids, and I just say to them, don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me
mm,
what you think. And so it was great because kids would, give me feedback, and they'd say, well, I like this bit. I'm not so sure about this bit, or, and in the end, I'm sure that the kids being champions of the books really helped a lot too.
mhm.
So one of our teachers, unbeknownst to me, made videos of her kids and their reactions to the story. And she sent them to me, and I'll never forget. We had this one little girl, Mary Louise, and she was as cute as a button. She had little red glasses, and her teacher said to her, "So, Mary Louise, why do you like Alice Miranda?" And she said, "Oh, I don't like her. I love her." And it was the cutest thing ever. And so when it came to when the book ended up at Random House, I actually sent this video compilation, which hadn't been made by me, but had been made by Georgina. Um, and, Lindsay Knight said to me, I just adored the fact that these kids were so enthusiastic about the stories. And so, yeah, I mean, that's sort of, I think all of that kind of, you know, came together.
Yeah, what a great sales pitch, though, isn't it? To have the kids who are your readers
Yeah.
talk so confidently about it with such enthusiasm. That's incredible. Oh, well, it truly has proven to be very you're quite right to stick with with that series and
Yeah.
champion that and stick with your gut. Yeah, surely that's it's worked out extremely well. 21 books now.
21 books and two
Yeah.
animated feature films later. Yes,
Oh
it's
God.
and something exciting else on the horizon, which I can't talk
Oh.
about yet, but
Oh,
there's something
what?
very exciting on the horizon as well.
Okay.
But yeah, and even like that strategy though, to give the book to young readers.
Mm.
So with The Girl and the Ghost, I gave The Girl and the Ghost, the manuscript, to four different young readers.
Mhm.
Some, oh, I mean, they were kids of people that I knew,
Yeah.
but sent them all around Australia. And to have the kids give their feedback was
Mhm.
amazing. I mean, one
Mhm.
little girl was in Dubai, one's in Adelaide, one was in Queensland, and one's in Queenstown, New Zealand.
Mhm.
So to have those kids be able to say what they thought before it went to print,
Mhm.
I think that's, it's incredibly valuable to get the kids' opinions because really, I mean, I'm writing for the kids. I'm not, it's lovely to have adult reviews that are very positive and glowing, but
Mhm.
ultimately, I want the kids to love it because they're the readership.
Yeah, no, that's a really good tip. Yeah, send it out maybe beforehand to the kids and see what
Mm.
they what feedback they can give you. Do you also have like beta readers or critique partners or anything that you send things to?
No,
Yeah, no,
no,
well, you probably don't need them now.
what I do though, I mean, I do talk to, like I'm
Yeah.
very good friends with several other, authors, and we'll talk about, oh, this bit's not working, or I need a
Mm.
bit of advice with this. Um, what I tend to do though, I have really close relationships with my publisher and my editor,
Mhm.
and my publicist,
Mhm.
and so if I'm stuck on something or if I'm not sure about something, I'll just call them up, and a lot of the time I actually will read to them, and that then I hear it and I think, oh, is that working? Is it not working?
Mm.
I'm very fortunate that I have, very extremely patient, patient publishers and editors who are wonderful to work with. And so also, and also that thing, I said earlier about wanting to be a one publisher author. So after my first 4 books, and when I went to then I went to Random House, and then obviously Random House merged with Penguin, and now it's Penguin Random House. So I have done 53 books with them. And so and all, you know, and when I say 53 books, I actually have more books because I have diaries and you know, movie tie-ins and all those sorts of things. I only count the books that I've kind of written and not repackaged. So for me, that cultivating of relationships has been extremely important. And so at Penguin, you know, I could walk into the office on any day of the week and there'll be 20 people that I can say hello to by name, which is probably quite unique, a unique situation to be in. And I mean, just when I was getting off the plane from when I was in Tasmania last week, and I was getting off the plane in Sydney, and the CEO of Penguin Random House and the sales director were there, and you know, I was like, "Oh, you're," and they were actually getting on the plane to go to Tasmania, sitting in the seats that my husband and I have just sat in. So you know, there's that serendipitous. Yeah, it's lovely.
It's a lovely story because, you know, that was your, in the first instance, you were saying, like, it would be so nice to just stay with one publisher for a long period of time, because that's how I see all the really famous authors. And it didn't quite start out that way, did it? But that's exactly what you've done now. And so it's a lovely story.
It's a nice way to just build relationships. And I think, you know, for me, I'm very loyal to them and they're very loyal to me. And so I know when we do something, they're going to put as much effort into it as I do. And I think that's really lovely to know that, you know, we've got that reciprocal relationship. And, you know, I've had, I suppose if we're talking, well, what is it, 16 years since I started with them, you know, I've only had a handful of different publishers, and I've only had a smaller handful of publicists. You know, and often when you're with the publicist, you travel with the publicist more than you travel with your family. And so it's really important that you get on and that you know, have a good relationship with them. I mean, I do feel like I'm taking my little sisters on tour most of the time.
Oh, that's perfect. It's still a family vibe then. That's
It's
incredible.
lovely.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's really nice. Oh, well, so you know, almost 70 books in just over 20 years. That kind of, you know, if my maths isn't too wrong, maybe about 3 books a year, Jacqueline, that you're pumping out. So tell me, do you you must have some sort of structure, and I'm sure that's probably changed over time. Are you a plotter or a pantser or a little bit of both?
Bit of both.
Yeah.
A bit of both, but I tend to plan, I'd like to say I plan like the big ideas, the bones of the story. So I will think very much about who's in it, where's it going to be set, you know, what are the sorts of quirks these characters might have. And often they develop over time as you write the story, they become more apparent. I will plan I'll think about the plot and think, well, you know, how's this going to play out? But I also like to give myself opportunities to be surprised. And so, you know, sometimes I can give you a prime example. So in Alice, Miranda in the Alps, which I actually just recorded for audio a couple of months ago, and I hadn't read it for years and years. And I knew that I had this woman in it called Sanzia. And Sanzia was very glamorous Italian in the snow in St. Moritz. And, you know, she just sort of seemed like she was a bit vapid, and she was with this very bossy Italian man. And the kids are like, oh, like she's a bit full of her own importance, this sort of thing. Anyway, at the end of it, I was sort of thinking, oh, you know, he's a baddie, this guy, the Italian guy. And then I thought, but what if she wasn't? What if she was Italian Secret Service? And so in the end, she comes in with the freewheeling spinning kicks, and she ends up like whacking this guy out of the way. And the kid's like, oh, Sanzia. And so, you know, in her huge high-heeled Balenciaga boots or whatever she's got on, she's kicking butt basically. And that sort of thing I love, because you don't always know, you know, even though I have a fairly good idea of who the baddies are, sometimes it's nice to be surprised. And even in The Girl and the Ghost at the moment, I've so the 3rd book, which is about to come out in May, so they have a new housekeeper. And you know, in the beginning, I thought, oh yeah, I've got an idea of who the housekeeper is, and but in the end, it will really shock readers not only who she is, but what she does to not, or to help Josephine rather than to hinder. So
Yeah, I love that when the story comes and surprises you. But
yeah,
also what you said a little bit earlier about think about what's obvious and then do the opposite of it.
right, the opposite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. That's great advice
Yeah,
as
thanks,
well.
Marcus, for that tip many years ago.
Yeah, no, that's a very good tip. And tell us about your craft of how you actually get the words on the paper. Do you have any writing tools that you use? Do you use Scrivener? You just straight into Word?
Word. I have a notebook for every different series or whatever has a series of notebooks, and that's where I scribble my ideas. But I often scribble during the process. I'll start writing things down. I have a whiteboard, and I often write stuff all over the whiteboard, and then I'll photograph it and put it in a folder to do with the story. And once I've kind of got the outline and the ideas of the characters and that sort of thing, I just start typing. But I type in Word, and I always have the comments part open so that I can write myself notes throughout the process. That's how it goes. I did look at things like Scrivener, and I just sort of feel like I need to do it my way, and I need to do it organically, and that's how it works for me. And all power to anybody who uses whatever they want to use, except AI. Let's not be going there at all. But yeah, I'm very simple the way I do it. It's a very simple process.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's like you said, whatever works for you to get the words down. Yeah, don't like I actually do use Scrivener, but I think in the most absolute basic way. Like I have sort of one little file for each scene or chapter, and but I hear it can do some pretty incredible stuff, which I'm just not even going to get into. And don't want to spend too much time on that, and just stick with what I know.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So you mentioned before, Jacqueline, about writing a book and having it published, and then in an ideal world it would just go out there and sell itself and be amazing. But you definitely do have to put a lot of work in. I mean, your publishers are backing you, and you have publicity, depending on the size of your publisher as well. Some people don't. Some publishers, it's a one-man show, or they've only got one person spread across all their authors. So you do, it is a teamwork, isn't it, to get your book out there? And you're definitely someone who is very busy and very active in that space. So what advice can you give authors who are newly published about what can they do to help get their book out there and in the hands of readers more?
Okay, so one of the things I think that works really well, and you don't have to have a massive team behind you to be able to do this. Visit the bookshops, but let them know that you're coming. And so, call the bookshop, say, my name's blah, I've got a new book out. I was just wondering, is there a time that might be convenient to come and say hello and to maybe sign any of the books that you have? Because that lets the shop, first of all, they can say, oh, we're too busy, or you don't have that embarrassment factor of if you walk in and they say, oh, look, sorry, we're not interested. And that happens. It does happen. It's happened to me numerous times where, they kind of, when you first start out and they're kind of like, who, what do you do? So I think, though, relationships with booksellers is really, really important. And for me, like now, for example, I was in Hobart last week and in Launceston, and I didn't let them know I was coming because I wasn't actually there for a book tour. I was there on a golf trip. But I walked into Petrarch's bookshop, and I haven't been there for about 5 years, maybe. And, I didn't even, I had no expectations that they'd have much stock or anything like that. But I walked in, and fortunately, because I have done signings with them 5-6 years ago, I walked in and Marcus looked at me and he said, hello, Jacqueline Harvey. I said, oh, hello, Marcus, how are you going? And then, Andy, his sister, appears with a great big pile of books to sign. So, that's a lovely experience. But, I've had the corollary of that. I was in Cairns last year and I walked into a bookshop and they had a couple of my books. And I said, oh, hello, I'm Jacqueline Harvey. Would you like me to sign these books? And they said, no. I was like, okay, fine. Yep, that's okay. I don't mind.
Oh no.
So, and that was last year. That wasn't like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. That was last year. So, you can have interesting experiences no matter how long you've been in the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think relationships with booksellers is a really lovely way to, and especially independent booksellers as well, who are going to hand sell your books. Although, honestly, the chain booksellers have lots of wonderful staff members who, if they get onto a book that they love, they will champion that, and, they'll hand sell it as well. So I think that's one thing that you can do to help your own cause. The other thing is engage. Social media is a kind of double-edged nightmare because you want to engage, but you don't want to bombard people, and it's always all about you. So I think one of the things that I really advocate is, your listeners will probably know about the website Your Kids Next Read, which is run by Megan Daly and Alison Tate and Alison Rushby, and all good friends of mine. And they have a very sort of strict rule about authors not promoting their own work. But one of the things that you can do as an author is to be generous to your author colleagues. And, when a parent posts on there, I'd really like a funny story, it'd be great if it had a teacher in it, blah, blah. And then I can say, well, Mr. Bambuckle by Tim Harris, that's a great series, So having sort of, I guess, a generosity of spirit towards your fellow authors it's a really lovely reciprocal relationship, because then, you kind of hope when somebody asks for, oh, has anyone got a book about a little girl and a dog? You think, oh, somebody might write Willow and Wolf on there. So that's a way to use social media in a really positive way, and to, join with groups that just lift people up and raise people up, and make yourself part of a community, and in doing that, just be a giver, not a taker.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And so celebrating other people's successes as well.
Absolutely, because I have heard there are times where you hear, and we all get disgruntled at times. We all get kind of like, oh, really? Like, I've missed out on that again. I'm not. Nobody gave me a nod again. We all feel like that. But at the same time, I still remember the day that Marcus Zuzak appeared on Good Morning America, and somebody sent me the clip, and their comment was kind of a bit like, well, look at this. And I was like, and my response to that was like, go, Marcus. Like, if that's you, why couldn't that be me one day? Why couldn't that be all of us? And I just think, be happy and celebrate other people's successes. Because it's not going to make you feel any better by denigrating other people.
No, that's right. And I don't think it opens up doors, does it, to help you get there either? Yeah.
No. And one of the things that for me too, like when I started out, none of this sort of thing, your wonderful podcasts like yours existed. And it was very much a matter of, you used to buy the old what was it, Writer's Marketplace, the old doorstep yellow covered book. And that was how you found out about stuff. And for me, when I sort of got a toenail in the door, and it was really interesting, the authors who would give you advice and others who would just clam up and not tell you anything. And I've always been someone who says, look, show me what you've got, or ask me what you want to know, because it doesn't, just because someone else might get a gig doesn't mean that you're going to not get a gig. It's there's all of that too. So if you know stuff, share it.
Yes, because there's a lot of comparison, isn't there, between authors, especially starting out, wanting to have the things that other people have. And
oh yeah, and comparison is the thief of joy.
It
really is.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Now, Jacqueline, can I ask you one quick question before we finish up? You're obviously very busy, you're constantly writing. I feel like it must be like perpetual rounds of edits and writing and drafting for you. How do you, plus, all the marketing side of it that we just spoke about, social media and getting out there. Recently, we've been getting asked this question a lot from not just aspiring authors, but established authors. How do you manage to do all that, avoiding burnout?
Okay.
How do you balance that?
It is a bit of a juggle all the time, and I will say in 2019 I think I had probably reached a point where I was absolutely exhausted, and on top of all the excitement of, I think I had about 5 books come out that year. I then had the movie, the first Alice Miranda movie, come out in November, which was super exciting, but on top of everything else was exhausting. And I do remember, and I'm sure Vinny won't mind me saying this, Belinda Morell, who's one of my dearest friends, her and I sitting in a coffee shop in Melbourne having breakfast and both bursting into tears and saying we'd just done too much, we couldn't do any more. And I think it was a bit of a reality check. And in fact, then, the next year, what happens? COVID. And so for me, I mean, I hate to say it, but COVID was like the break that I needed to have in some ways, because it meant that I couldn't tour and I had to stay at home, and it was actually an enforced hiatus, if you like, from all the external busyness. So I think that was an opportunity to take a big, long, deep breath and sort of say, okay, well, how are you going to do this when you go back to, when the world starts up again? Mm-hmm. And I think what I have been quite intentional about is blocking out times to write and then blocking times that I tour. And so having, like at the moment, there's sort of a six-week block that I'm writing, and then I'm going to Australia, because I don't know if your listeners know, but I live between Queenstown, New Zealand and Sydney. And so we are fortunate enough to have a place here in Queenstown and an apartment in Sydney. And so I spend probably a little bit more time in Australia over the year, but it just depends how things go. And so for me, it's about writing in New Zealand. And when I'm home writing, I tend to be able to do a lot more. I can play golf once a week, or I can go to pickleball a few times a week and have that better balance. And then when I'm touring, it is really full on. It's much busier, and you are full on into touring, and you're doing, X number of school visits a day, or you might be doing bookshop visits or going to do events. But I am trying to focus that into a shorter period of time and not sort of let that run on for, too long each time. So I guess that's one way. And I'm also one who lives and dies by the Outlook calendar. So everything I do, apart from, I suppose, pretty much everything I do is in the calendar, and I will know a long way in advance. I can tell you that on I think it's the probably 2nd of November, I'm going to be in a school in Singapore, mm-hmm. And so I can tell you a long time in advance how things are going to go. So planning long term for me is really important during the year. Mm-hmm. And also now, putting more opportunities for a bit of downtime in there as well. I guess just being more deliberate in the way that I plan, and also learning to say no to things sometimes too, that if it's not something that's really going to, move stuff along and help me, sometimes you just have to say no.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No,
and I'm not very good at saying no, but I'm going to get better.
Yeah, it is hard, isn't it? Because you feel like you should, you're grateful for the opportunities, and also feel like you should, take all of them as well. So
absolutely.
That's very good advice. So do you have one overall top tip for our emerging authors or our debut authors, Jacqueline?
Okay. Don't give up your day job.
Yet.
Don't give up your day job yet. Some people do. They do get a book deal and they get very excited and they think, oh, this is it. I'm going to, make a lot of money and I'm going to be fine. It takes a long time. I mean, my career it takes 10 years to be an overnight success, if you like. And that was very planned and deliberate as well, that I knew how many books I had to have out that were doing well to be able to, give up my other job. And also that, it's generally not just writing. There's a lot of other things. So you do school visits, you do, I teach writing courses to kids in the holidays sometimes. And, there's a whole bunch of other ways that you earn an income. I think, though, my biggest bit of advice is write what you love. Write the books that make your heart soar, and as in SOAR, not SORE. Write those books that make you happy and make you want to, that you would have wanted to read when you were a kid, and tap into who you were as a kid. Or, always remember, one of the best bits of advice I ever got was from an illustrator friend, Donna Rawlins, years and years and years ago. And I first met her and she said, how old are you? And I thought, wow, she's forward. asking me how old I am. I've only met her 5 minutes ago. What's this? And she said, no, I don't care how old you are. She said, how old are you in your head when you write a story? And I thought that's really great advice because, you know, for me, I'm sort of perpetually 10 years old when I'm in my favorite places in childhood in my head when I'm writing stories. And I think that's important to tap into. So, you know, to be a children's author, you've got to remember what it was like to be a child.
Yeah, very important advice. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. That was an incredible interview. You have so much information to share. We could talk for hours.
Whole day.
I know there's so much to talk about. We'll have to get you back on again. But thank you so much for being so generous and sharing that information. It's really important.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you for having me. It's I know it's, you know, there's so many people out there who want to write, and it's a hard road. And you know, I don't think there's no point sugarcoating it and saying it's easy, because then people just become disenfranchised and sort of think, oh, I'll give up. But if you want it enough, you'll do it.
Yeah. Perfect advice to finish on. Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
Okay.
Good luck with Book 3, Girl and the Ghost.
Thank you.
See you. Thank you for listening to the Book Deal podcast. We're able to bring you these weekly writerly chats because of our amazing patrons. Join the TPD family by becoming a member of our Patreon community at patreon.com/The Book Deal podcast. And if you love the pod, please give us a rating or review. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook.